12 minutes before the wedding, while hundreds of guests were laughing beneath the bright afternoon sun, the bride grabbed my wrist and pulled me behind a row of white roses. Her hands were shaking so badly that she nearly dropped the bouquet, and when she looked into my eyes, every trace of the confident woman I had known was gone. She leaned close and whispered the words that changed everything: "Please, help me stop this wedding. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a meaningful comment, and subscribe to our channel so our family can continue sharing stories that remind us that sometimes the hardest decision is also the one that saves a life." My name is Graham Mercer, and until that afternoon, I had never imagined that I would be asked to stop a wedding. I was 39 years old, single, and working as an event photographer. I had spent years photographing other people's happiest moments while quietly avoiding questions about my own. Weddings had always fascinated me because everyone looked so certain in the photographs. They smiled, held hands, kissed beneath flowers, and promised forever. What the camera never captured were the doubts people swallowed before walking down the aisle. The bride was Celeste Rowan. I had known Celeste for almost 15 years, though we had never been romantic. We met when we were both volunteering at a community center. She was organizing a literacy program for children, and I was helping repair the building. Celeste was warm, intelligent, stubborn, and fiercely protective of anyone she cared about. She had a habit of carrying other people's problems as though they were her responsibility. If a friend was struggling, she showed up. If a neighbor needed help, she was there. If someone was hurting, she listened until they felt less alone. Over the years, we became close friends. I watched her survive the death of her mother, build a successful career as a school counselor, and eventually meet a man named Adrian Vale. Adrian was charming. He was successful. He was confident. And at first, I genuinely liked him. He seemed to adore Celeste. He sent flowers to her workplace, remembered small details about her life, and spoke proudly about her accomplishments. When he proposed, Celeste showed me the ring with tears in her eyes. I had never seen her happier. But as the wedding approached, something began to change. It wasn't obvious at first. Adrian started making decisions for her. He encouraged her to leave the school where she worked because he believed she was spending too much time helping other people. He wanted them to move to another city after the wedding. He suggested that she stop volunteering at the community center. He insisted that they combine their finances and said that because he earned more, he should handle the money. Whenever Celeste disagreed, Adrian would tell her she was overthinking. I noticed it. So did some of her friends. But Celeste defended him. She said he was simply stressed. She said marriage required compromise. She said every relationship had difficult seasons. I wanted to believe her. Then came the wedding day. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon at a beautiful countryside estate. The sun was bright, the gardens were full of white roses, and guests had arrived from across the country. Musicians played soft music while servers carried trays of sparkling drinks across the lawn. I was hired to photograph the wedding. Celeste looked breathtaking. Her dress was simple and elegant, with delicate lace around the sleeves. Her hair was pinned loosely, and her mother's old pearl earrings rested against her neck. She should have looked peaceful. Instead, every time I saw her, she seemed distracted. At one point, I caught her staring at Adrian from across the garden. He was talking with his older brother, Marcus. Marcus was the kind of man who made people uncomfortable without saying much. He was involved in Adrian's business and seemed to have influence over almost every important decision Adrian made. Celeste looked away when Adrian glanced toward her. I walked over and asked if she was all right. She smiled. It was the kind of smile people use when they don't want anyone to ask a second question. She told me she was fine. I didn't believe her. But the ceremony was approaching, and there was nothing I could do without proof. Then, 12 minutes before the wedding, everything changed. Celeste suddenly appeared beside me. She grabbed my wrist and pulled me behind the roses. Her face was pale. Her breathing was shallow. She looked terrified. And then she whispered that she needed my help stopping the wedding. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. I asked what had happened. She told me that Adrian had left a folder in the bridal suite. She had accidentally opened it while looking for her phone. Inside were documents she had never seen before. There were bank statements, property agreements, a financial authorization form, and a document with her signature. Except she had never signed it. The document gave Adrian control over a large portion of the savings she had inherited from her mother. Celeste had always assumed the money would remain hers after marriage. But the documents showed that Adrian had been planning something very different. He wasn't simply trying to control their future finances. He was trying to gain access to everything she owned. She had confronted him privately. He had become angry. He told her that if she embarrassed him by canceling the wedding, he would make sure everyone knew about her financial problems and personal struggles. But that wasn't the worst part. Celeste pulled a second document from her handbag. It was a letter from Adrian's lawyer. The letter stated that after the marriage, Celeste would be expected to leave her job and sign over management of her inheritance. If she refused, Adrian could pursue legal action based on the agreement she supposedly signed. Celeste looked at me with tears in her eyes. She wasn't afraid of losing money. She was afraid of losing herself. She told me that during the last few months, she had slowly stopped recognizing the woman she had become. She had stopped seeing friends because Adrian disliked them. She had stopped volunteering because he called it a waste of time. She had started asking permission before making ordinary decisions. And that morning, while sitting in front of the mirror in her wedding dress, she finally understood. She wasn't walking toward a marriage. She was walking toward a cage. I asked her what she wanted to do. She said she wanted to leave. But she was terrified. Hundreds of people were waiting. Her father had spent months organizing the wedding. Her younger sister had flown across the country. Everyone expected her to walk down that aisle. Celeste feared disappointing them more than she feared disappointing herself. I told her that disappointing people for one afternoon was better than disappointing herself for the rest of her life. But we had to move carefully. Adrian couldn't know yet. We needed to get her safely away from the estate. I contacted the venue manager, who was an old friend of mine, and quietly explained that there was an emergency involving the bride. He immediately agreed to delay the ceremony without announcing why. Celeste's sister, Maeve, was the next person we brought in. When Maeve heard what had happened, she broke down. She admitted that she had suspected something was wrong for months but had been afraid to interfere. Celeste hugged her. For the first time that day, she wasn't standing alone. Then something unexpected happened. Celeste's father arrived. His name was Arthur Rowan. He had always been proud of his daughter, but he had also been deeply invested in the wedding. He had helped pay for much of it, and he had spent months telling everyone how happy he was to see Celeste finally settle down. When Celeste showed him the documents, his expression changed completely. He recognized Adrian's signature. Then he revealed something none of us knew. A few weeks earlier, Adrian had approached him privately and asked about Celeste's inheritance. Arthur had thought it was simply financial planning. Now he realized it had been something else. Manipulation. Control. Preparation. Arthur looked at his daughter and apologized for not seeing it sooner. Celeste told him she didn't need an apology. She needed him to believe her. He did. And that was enough. The wedding guests had begun noticing the delay. Whispers spread through the garden. Some people assumed Celeste had become nervous. Others assumed there had been a disagreement. Adrian grew impatient. He demanded to know where she was. Then Marcus came looking for her. I stepped between him and the bridal suite. He tried to intimidate me. He told me I was ruining someone's wedding. I told him that if the marriage was honest, the truth shouldn't be dangerous. That silenced him. Then Adrian arrived. He was furious. Celeste stepped out of the room. She was still wearing her wedding dress. But she no longer looked frightened. She looked determined. She told Adrian she was ending the wedding. He tried to convince her that she was confused. Then he blamed stress. Then he blamed me. Then he accused her of being ungrateful. Finally, when none of that worked, his mask disappeared completely. He threatened her. That was the moment Arthur stepped forward. He told Adrian that the wedding was over and that Celeste would never be pressured into marrying anyone. Adrian tried to argue. But the guests had already begun gathering nearby. And people were listening. Celeste looked around at the hundreds of faces. She expected judgment. Instead, something surprising happened. Her aunt hugged her. Her sister stood beside her. One of her oldest friends began crying. The venue manager quietly told her that the entire staff supported her decision. Even several guests who had traveled hours to attend told her that leaving was the bravest thing they had ever seen. The wedding never happened. But Celeste's life did not fall apart. It began again. The following weeks were difficult. Adrian's lawyers attempted to challenge the documents, but forensic review showed that Celeste's signature had been copied from an old financial form. The matter became a legal investigation. Celeste had to face the uncomfortable reality that the man she loved had been planning to control her financially. That truth broke her heart. There were days when she questioned herself. She wondered how she had missed the signs. She blamed herself for trusting him. I reminded her that manipulation works precisely because it rarely begins with cruelty. It begins with small compromises. A suggestion becomes an expectation. An expectation becomes a rule. A rule becomes control. And one day, the person being controlled looks in the mirror and realizes they have been disappearing. Celeste eventually returned to the community center where we had first met. She began counseling women who were rebuilding their lives after controlling relationships. She didn't pretend to have all the answers. She simply listened. Months later, she organized a fundraiser to renovate the old community library. I volunteered to photograph the event. The same woman who had once been terrified to disappoint a garden full of wedding guests now stood before a crowded room talking openly about courage. She told everyone that sometimes the bravest word a person can say is no. Not because they hate someone. Because they finally love themselves enough to stop abandoning who they are. After the event, Celeste and I walked through the garden outside. It was a bright afternoon. She wasn't wearing a wedding ring. She wasn't wearing anything that belonged to the life she had almost entered. Instead, she wore her mother's pearl earrings. She told me that she had kept them on her wedding day because she wanted to feel close to her mother. Then she smiled and said she finally understood what her mother had always taught her. Love should make you feel safe enough to be yourself. Not afraid enough to become someone else. I asked her whether she regretted the wedding day. She thought about it. Then she said she regretted how long she had ignored her instincts, but she didn't regret stopping the wedding. Because that 12-minute decision had given her the rest of her life back. I realized then that the most important photograph I had taken that day wasn't of the bride in her dress. It was the photograph I captured later, when Celeste stood barefoot in the grass, laughing with her sister, completely free. There was no groom beside her. No wedding ceremony. No perfect ending in the traditional sense. But there was something better. There was a woman who had chosen herself. And sometimes that is the beginning of the most beautiful love story of all. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Before you leave, I want you to tell our community something meaningful. Have you ever had to walk away from something that looked perfect from the outside because you knew it was hurting you on the inside? Your comment might give courage to someone who is standing at that same crossroads today. As for Celeste, she never walked down that aisle. And years later, she would say that those 12 minutes were the longest and most frightening minutes of her life. But they were also the minutes that saved her. Because sometimes courage doesn't look like standing in front of hundreds of people and making a grand speech. Sometimes courage is simply taking someone's hand, whispering that you need help, and choosing not to disappear inside a life that was never meant for you. And sometimes the wedding you stop is the life you save.